So I'm going to say welcome again. We've got 28 participant screens. It's lovely to have you all with us for our Holy Land journey. Now, most of the time we're going to be sharing our screens so that you can see our photographs. So I'll start doing that in a minute, and we'll talk for a little while, but then I'll come back to you to check you're still there and to see if anybody wants to ask anything, and then we'll carry on. So I'm going to share my screen. So we went to the Holy Land in 2013, which must be 8 years ago now, but it seems like it was only yesterday.
Can I interrupt? Just to say that if people put it, as well as seeing the screen, if they put onto speaker at the little side, you should just get a little picture of Jackie and I as we're speaking, rather than other people.
Well, just a minute, I'm going back now. Because what I should have done was, spotlight us, and then that will happen. Right. You think you're getting used to Zoom, and then these things happen. Just allowing somebody else to come in. So going back to the screen sharing. Jen's happy now because she can see us by the side. So as I was saying, we went to the Holy Land together as part of a party with McCabe Pilgrimages in 2013. And as we go along, we'll say how that came about and something more about the actual tour. But just a quick skirmish here at the beginning. We're going to go to Bethlehem. That's Manger Square in Bethlehem. A quick visit to Nazareth. That's what it looks like when we were there 8 years ago. We'll go by the River Jordan, spend some time at the Sea of Galilee. Looks like a heron or an egret flying overhead there. That's probably long since gone. That's the hotel we stayed in Galilee, right by the lake there. Oh, it has a lovely swimming pool. I'm just showing you this at the beginning. There's us. We didn't stay very long, actually, did we? Cold. No, it was very cold. So let's quickly move on. And that's the hotel we stayed in Jerusalem, the Golden Walls Hotel. Now we're going to go through the photos in the order of Jesus's life, but the order we actually visited the places was the other way round. So in fact, we went to Jerusalem first and then to the other places. But as we talk about it tonight, I'm going to start in Bethlehem and end up in Jerusalem, particularly as it's Holy Week. It seemed right to finish with the death and resurrection in Jerusalem. As I say, we went with McCabe Pilgrimages, but with a tour leader that we knew and a group of people, some of whom were from Bury St Edmunds, my parents' church at the time, and some people from other places. And there the group is on the Mount of Olives, looking over to the old city of Jerusalem. Now, this man on the left is the Reverend Vaughan Tong, who led our particular group, and Jen's going to tell you her story of how we came to go with this particular group.
Well, when I lived in Sussex, in Haywards Heath in mid Sussex, from when a child, but in my early 20s, Reverend Vaughan Tong was the minister and at the church, and he began taking pilgrimages to the Holy Land, and I put my name down to go with him. But then not long before they were due to go, I ended up having to go into hospital for an orthopedic operation. So
you were in your 20s, weren't you? So it was a long time ago.
yes,
Yeah.
So I couldn't go, and I always thought, oh, I've missed out on that. I don't know how I'm going to. How will that happen? Anyway, about 10 years ago now, as Jacqui said, her parents were in Bury St Edmunds and went to Trinity Methodist Church, and we went one Sunday, and at the end of the service, somebody announced, oh, by the way, Vaughan Tong is going to take another group to the Holy Land in a couple of years' time. If anybody would be interested, just let him know. So I went straight up to him afterwards and I said, this is about 30 years late, but can I go, or Jacqui and I go now with you? And so I kind of felt special that the same person that I was intended to go in my 20s, I ended up going with later life. So that's Vaughan.
And for me, I'd never thought of going at all. It's not an ambition that I'd had. I never thought I would, and I never particularly wanted to. But when Jen met Vaughan again and wanted to sign up for this particular tour, I wasn't going to let her go on her own. So I ended up going, and of course it was a really special time. And I'm just so glad now that that both of us did have the experience. So let's start in Bethlehem. Now, I know that some of you who are on this Zoom will have been to the Holy Land and will have been to Bethlehem. And perhaps if there's time at the end, we can share different experiences. If you have been, I hope the photos are a good reminder for you. One feature about us going was we didn't really know what we were going to, which may sound silly, but we hadn't read anything up about it. And suddenly we were going to sites and we didn't really understand what they were. That applied in Bethlehem because here was this big structure here and a big church. And really, I don't know about you, Jen, but I'd no idea why we were going there, which does sound really silly now. And one thing that we learned quickly was that at any important Christian site, somebody had built a church. They probably built it a long time ago, like this one. That a tradition had built up in the first few centuries that this was the site of, in this case, Jesus' nativity. And a structure was put over it to preserve it. And then it became a church, and then it became a bigger church. And in fact, if people hadn't built churches over these sites, the sites wouldn't be there. So at first, it seemed incongruous that there should be a big church over where supposedly there was a stable and a manger. But if the church wasn't there, there wouldn't have been anything there. And of course, we don't know how historical these different sites are. Some of them have more historicity and genuineness than others. But we'll say a bit more as we go along. So we went into this big church, and there were lots of other people that also seemed to want to go in. And we found ourselves queuing for a grotto, which is what has been built over the site of the supposed site of the Nativity. Now, Jen, this Jen, you're in the picture there on the left, and
Yeah.
this meant a lot to you, didn't it?
Yes, yes. Oddly, you could see the crowds in two different ways. You could just think of it as, oh dear, what a lot of people, and it's a tourist site. But what it is that we were going to see was, if not the exact place, but a place that is recognised as the birth of Jesus. And all these people, and obviously you can't hear the noise, but a lot of these people around were speaking in different languages. But all these people were coming, presumably as busy as this, day after day after day, to see where Jesus was born. And I just found it incredibly moving. There's even more people there.
And here we are down into a next layer, aren't we?
Yeah.
We were going down into the depths, and the accoutrements of a Christian church were all around. I think it's all Orthodox, but somebody may correct me on that. But we had to go through this little gap on the left there, and this is what we were queuing to see. And I obviously got close enough to take this photograph. To be honest, I don't know what's down the hole, but presumably, I don't know if it was earth down there or if it was stone.
You couldn't get any nearer than that. Just
No, no, you couldn't touch it or anything. I think I found this more moving, actually. A lovely picture of the Nativity that was on the wall. Now, we went outside of Bethlehem to an area that's called Shepherd's Fields. Before we went, I had been asked by Vaughan whether whether Jen and I would lead a service and whether I would preside at communion at Shepherd's Fields. Now, as I've said, I didn't really know what he meant, Shepherd's Fields. I didn't know whether he meant a field where supposedly the shepherds were who heard of Jesus's birth. But when we got there, it turned out to be a managed area by the Roman Catholic Church. And here's a shot of it here. And down that right-hand path is a church, a chapel. And people come to this area to go to the church. And there was a particular, I think it was a painting that people wanted to see. Another difficulty is that when you're doing these things and you don't know what you're going to, you don't know what you should take photos of. So if I go back there, I shall take a photo of the inside of the church and what people were particularly looking at. But I've just got this one photo of the outside. But also in this area of Shepherd's Fields are some so-called caves, some structures built in to the hillside. And this one that we're looking at houses a chapel, and this is where the communion service was to take place for our particular group. But when we got there, we ran into problems because since Vaughan had been there last, the person who was in charge of the site had changed. And as I said, this was a Roman Catholic looked after site, and a much stricter man had taken over, and he would not allow a woman to preside at communion here. So Vaughan got very cross and wanted to go ahead and me to do it anyway. Now, I wouldn't have wanted to if the authorities wouldn't allow it, but the pilgrimage courier person, I think he must have consulted the organisation, and they said that if we broke the rules, McCabe pilgrimages might be banned from going there forever. So Vaughan then conceded, and we agreed that he would preside at communion, but Jen and I would still lead the worship that we planned. Now, I didn't mind this at all, and in fact it had a very good consequence, which we'll talk about in a little while. But this is the inside of that chapel. And so we did lead the service from the front there, with the rest of our group sitting on those benches. I'm just going to stop sharing for the moment. As I said I would do, because I just want to check you're all still there. Oh, that's good, you are. Would anyone like to ask anything at this stage? Otherwise, I'm just going to go on. If anyone would like to, raise your hand.
Heather.
Oh, we've got Heather. You'll have to unmute, Heather.
Just want to say that Shepherd's Fields, was that actually the area where the shepherds were supposedly visited by the angels?
Well,
is that what they was, you know, because that's what you thought, wasn't it?
Well, I thought that's why it was called that.
Yeah.
Most of these places that we visited and that are in the guidebooks have a big question mark over them.
Right.
No, we cannot know whether those are the those are the fields. It has reputedly been over hundreds of years. It's like that church over the nativity site that was built, I can't remember how many AD, whether it was 400 or 500 AD, but it goes back quite a long way. Maybe it was still short enough time after the time of Jesus for people to know that that was the place. And then they built a church and it's sort of enshrined. Now that may be the case with the fields as well. Maybe it was passed down the generations that this was the bit where the biblical record was.
Okay.
But maybe not. Maybe it's out of people's imagination. And but by the end of the time, I came to think it didn't actually matter. That if you go to a lovely place with a lovely chapel and you celebrate communion and you think of those shepherds and the angels, and it provides a place for sort of divine encounter, it doesn't, in the end, it doesn't really matter whether that's the actual place or not.
No, I can see how, yeah. When you've experienced it, it doesn't matter.
Let's just do something.
Two more.
Thanks, Jacqui.
Okay, let's take the spotlight off you. I should have asked at the beginning, how many, can you just raise your hand if you have been to the Holy Land? I've just got to look at both screens. So only a couple of people actually. Oh no, three or four people. Okay, right, I'll go back to my screen and we'll take a look at Nazareth.
I know we've just seen Nazareth earlier on, but just from my own point of view, when you think of Nazareth as this tiny little place, and you come round the corner and you suddenly see that, that was one of the most shocking, as in surprising, views that we had in the whole of the time we were there. We thought, that can't be Nazareth.
Heather, are you still unmuted? I don't know if you want to mute again.
Okay.
Yes, I looked it up today actually to see what the population was at the time of Jesus, and it was less than 200 people. And and that today it's a town of 60,000 of both Arabs and Israelis. Yes, so this is a shock to the system. You think you're going to Nazareth and this quiet little backwater, and you end up seeing this sort of city, really. But in the middle, it was quite nice, and of course there was a church, St. Gabriel's Church, and we all trooped in there, and there was a well that I think still gives water, although you can't see it. I don't know if that's seeing water or not. And it was called Mary's Well, and tradition says that that Mary, it was the only well in the place at the time of Jesus. So Mary would undoubtedly have gone and drawn water there. Now that becomes much more genuine because it's definitely Nazareth, it's definitely an old well. And if it was the only one in the place, then that makes that extremely likely. Then there's another big church, and as you can see, this is more modern. And this is known as the Church of the Annunciation, the church celebrating Mary conceiving Jesus and being told by the angel that she is going to have a baby. And this was a rather lovely, spacious church to look round. And this is in an outside bit, and they had pictures of Mary and child from every country that you could possibly think of. Just got one here as an example. This one was from Korea. So we could have spent ages just looking at all these different pictures from different nationalities.
But it brings home the same as I was saying earlier about hearing different languages. When you see so many different countries and the image in their own, as in the style of each country, it really brings home to you that Jesus isn't just about a European Jesus, it's really worldwide.
Yes, reflected in the people we saw at the sites and in this sort of thing. Also in Nazareth, we popped into a very small synagogue, which was an old synagogue. I don't know now whether it dated back to the 1st century or not. I think that's unlikely. It's more likely to be medieval, isn't it, I think. But it was a lovely place to go, and one could just imagine Jesus being there, healing the man with the withered hand, or teaching from the prophet Isaiah. Well, we're going to go into the Jordan Valley now and see the river, and this is the desert on the way. I took several photos of desert and wilderness. I can't think what to say, but of the wilderness. But this is the one I've put on here for you to see. That's through the coach window. We didn't get out. And this is also through the coach window. The river is there to be seen in the middle of the picture. And then we came to a tourist site, if one wants to call it that, or pilgrimage site, maybe, which is one of the places that's reputed to be where John the Baptist baptized Jesus. Now, there's 2 or 3 of these different places, so then you know they can't be all of them. And they have different reputations, and maybe one has got more claim than another. But we came to this place where decking has been put down and where there's various facilities for people who want to come and scoop themselves a bit of Jordan River. And this is our party. people have bought bottles in advance. Well, I've just noticed that one lady looks as though she's about to take her shoes off. Don't know if she was going to go in. And here's Jen collecting Jordan water in a bottle.
It may not have been exactly the right site, but of course it is exactly the right river. It is the
Except
Jordan.
that water wouldn't have been there at the time, would it?
No.
No, but it still felt very special. And we've still got, in fact, we got it out of the fridge, but we've left it in the kitchen. We've still got a bottle of water that we collected. And also a little bottle that I bought in a shop that says it's Jordan River water on it. Oh, Jen's going to go and get it. In fact, the year that we went was the year that my first grandchild was born, Henry. And so when he was baptized in an Anglican church in Coventry, we asked for some of this Jordan water to be put in the font. Oh, that says shampoo on it, so that can't be right. No, that must be our water.
Oh, I don't know.
Oh, well, anyway,
One of them.
but we didn't use what we collected for Henry. We used the shop bought one. But we've kept this Jordan water.
Which says it's apple juice or something, but
Yes,
that.
I don't know why we've kept it really, but except it seems too precious to throw away somehow.
can we move on?
Let's move on. Just one slide from Capernaum. Now, this was one of the places we went to that I found the most moving. And the reason for that is that there are archaeological excavations, as you can see, of genuine first century houses and homes. And that big building on stilts on the right is a church that's being built over the house that is supposedly Peter's mother-in-law's. Now, whether or not that's the case, that is Peter's mother-in-law's house, whether or not that's the case, Capernaum wasn't very big, and these houses were definitely there at the time. And in fact, you can see the roadway going through the middle of it, diagonally left to right across the screen. And I just found it very moving that Jesus did come here lots of times, and that he would have entered these houses. And I thought of the story of the paralyzed man who was let down through the roof because people couldn't get him to Jesus. And when I looked at the size of these houses, I thought, well, no wonder they couldn't get to him. Once there's a few people crammed into one of these rooms, then it would definitely be full up and people would be out on the roadway there. So, as I say, I found that particularly moving. But let's go on to Galilee. And I've got some lovely photographs of the lake because, of course, the weather was so lovely and the sky was so blue. And the lake is a very peaceful place when it's not stormy anyway. And it has surrounded by mountains, so it makes it lovely as well. Here's a party of people, nothing to do with our party, but I just saw them there all taking their shoes off and paddling in the Sea of Galilee. So I took their photo. Now, as part of our tour, we were taken across the lake in a boat like this. This is not our boat because I've taken the photo from the boat we were on. And this is what all the boats, all the tourist boats looked like as they were taking people across. And they obviously have a sort of set pattern, set things they do for visitors. And this man threw a net in. Now, as I said, it's 8 years ago, And Jen and I can't now remember whether he caught any fish or not. But whatever he did, it was staged. And you thought it was that he didn't catch any fish, and I think that he did catch a
Well,
fish.
I think he went to the other side and then caught fish.
Well, we can't remember. Anyway, it was an interesting experience. And it was also interesting because at different points on our trip, because it was a pilgrimage, we had prayers and readings at various points. And on the boat, we had the reading of Jesus stilling the storm. And this lady in the white crop trousers is called Val. She was and is a member of Trinity Church in Bury. And she read the reading of the stilling of the storm. But it was windy. And you can see people holding their, they may be shielding from the sun, but you can see from Val's hair that it was definitely windy. And it was quite dramatic, really, listening to this story with the wind affecting us on the Sea of Galilee. Somehow it all brought it to life. Now, at one of the points by the lake, there is an open air chapel, and here it is. And I told you earlier that I'd been asked to preside at communion in the Shepherd's Field Chapel. And Vaughan was going to do it here on the Sea of Galilee. But when I wasn't allowed to, and he ended up doing it in Bethlehem, he said to me that we would swap and that he would lead the service here, but I would preside at communion. So that experience at Shepherd's Fields, to me, had a very good effect, because it meant I was able to preside at communion on the shores of the Sea of Galilee. And, you know, I would never have thought that I would have ever got to do that in a million years. And yet here I was. And I don't believe in people taking photos while services are happening, but I gave my camera to one of the tour party and I said, please, will you just take one photo for me? And he took that photo. So it was a special occasion. And it was special for Jen because she played her recorder.
I had to provide the music for various services, and the easiest way was have a recorder.
It wasn't too heavy to lug in the suitcase, was it?
No, it didn't mind being hot either. I did. My violin would have minded being hot.
So this is rather a whirlwind tour, but I am glad we're getting through this quite quickly because there'll be time for questions and discussion at the end. Jerusalem. As I said earlier, we actually stayed in Jerusalem first in that hotel I showed you earlier. But it was strange. It seemed strange doing Jerusalem first and then going on to Galilee afterwards. But here we are looking at the Mount of Olives. Now on Sunday morning on the Zoom service, we showed you one photo of the Mount of Olives, but here's a wider view where the side of the city of Jerusalem, and we're looking across. So Bethany is in front of us, away 2 or 3 miles. And as you can see, there's now, it's built up at the top there. But one can imagine Jesus walking down there for Palm Sunday, getting to the bottom where there would not have been a big church, which there is now, crossing the valley and then going up into the temple. The church is called the Church of All Nations and celebrates what Jen was saying earlier, the number of people and Christians throughout the world who follow Jesus. So this was on the first day actually of our trip, and the coach took us to the top of the Mount of Olives and to the first big church that we experienced, which is called the Paternoster Church. And supposedly, and I'm very skeptical about this, supposedly it's on the site where Jesus taught his disciples the Lord's Prayer. But as I was saying to Heather, the fact that that's unlikely actually doesn't really matter. It was a lovely, peaceful church. And to think about Jesus sharing the Lord's Prayer with his friends, it seemed just the right place. And as you can see on the walls of the church and the surrounds were different versions in different languages of the Lord's Prayer. This is the one in English. Actually, we had to hunt for this one, and it was hidden away in a bit of a corner, but it was just so lovely to find it in the end. And there was a little chapel in the church, and groups were queuing up for their turn to go in there. So our group awaited its turn, and when we got in there, you can see Vaughan standing up there on the right. We sang the Lord's Prayer. Very, very moving.
Yes, because as we were waiting, the people before were, I think, were Chinese, so you could hear just the Lord's Prayer sung in Chinese, and then they came out, we went in, and then as we went out, some Germans went in and either said it or sang it. So it's the same sort of thing. There was a continual flow of people coming in to say or sing the Lord's Prayer.
We then walked down the Mount of Olives. Halfway down is this church, the Dominus Flevit Chapel, which means, I think, Jesus wept. And it represents the place where Jesus looked across the valley to Jerusalem and where he wept. It's got this lovely window inside, and you can see the present day city through the window at the bottom there. And that's the view as you look across. The old city in front, and you can see a wall there, but that's not, of course, the first century wall, because that was all destroyed in AD 70. Well, most of it was destroyed, so I think that's medieval, that wall. And instead of a temple now, on the Temple Mount is a mosque, that large mosque called the Golden Dome. And I suppose it really struck me actually when we were visiting the temple site, how these three great religions all sort of meet at this point. It's a special place for the Jews, it's a special place for the Christians, and it's a special place for the Muslims. And they believe that where the temple is where Abraham nearly sacrificed his son Isaac. So for them too, it's a special place. So we carried on walking down, and at the bottom of the Mount of Olives is the Garden of Gethsemane. And it's a lovely place. And this really is the Garden of Gethsemane, I think. It's been there since the time of Jesus. I mean, presumably it's been developed and things have happened to it. But I think undoubtedly it is the original garden, and with some very, very ancient olive trees. So here's another view of it. And here is a very old olive tree that I think does date, do I dare say it dates back 2,000 years? I want to say that.
I think it does, yeah.
As you can see, it's got a very, very wide trunk. So we left the Garden of Gethsemane, we crossed the valley, and now we started walking up towards the site of the ancient temple. And we showed you on Sunday morning the steps that you can just see there on the left behind those railings. And we were saying on Sunday that Jesus and his disciples, in fact, anybody who was entering the temple, having crossed the Kidron Valley, that was the way in. So on Palm Sunday, they would have gone up the slope at this point. That's me, by the way, just to prove I was there, if it wasn't obvious. So on the Temple Mount now, a lot of it is just open, or various structures. That's our party at the front there. And there were these groups of people all over. And undoubtedly, these were pilgrims, not tourists, because people were gathering, they were praying, they were holding services. And in a lot of these sites, there are different places where different groups can hold their own services in their own language. And here's a party of children. Don't know what nationality they are, whether they're Jewish, but they're being shepherded along by a teacher. And you can see some people on the left there sitting on chairs who are obviously having some sort of study or meeting. And here's the one bit of the temple that remains from the destruction in AD 70, the Western Wall, also known as the Wailing Wall, and it's because it remains from the original building that it's so special to Jews, and that's why they want to pray at it. But the men and the women are segregated. You can see the line of women at the front of the photo. They are looking over the fence.
Well, the crowd of the men that they're looking over, that's near to the fence they're at, was a bar mitzvah.
Oh, there was a bar mitzvah, yes.
So that's a significant family event, but the fact the women can only watch and the men were involved in it.
Yes, I'd forgotten that. In fact, there was a procession, wasn't there?
Mm.
Yeah. And here's the dome on the rock. One of our party is taking a photograph of it nearer than I was. I mean, it did look absolutely amazing in the blue sky and the gold dome. I took a lot of photos of it, actually, but we weren't allowed to go in.
No, I mean, earlier in the year, apparently, it was only about 6 months before we went, that you could still go in. They did allow Christians to go in, but I don't know why it was changed that we weren't allowed to go in.
Yes, so the people who have been to Jerusalem who are on this Zoom, they may have gone at a different time and been able to go in there. Now, nearby the temple is the pool of Bethesda, or I'm just hesitating because I also want to say the pool of Siloam, and I'm just trying to think whether they're the same place. Anyway, this is definitely where Jesus healed the man who was trying to get into the water in order to be cured. And he said to Jesus, I can never make it in time. And Jesus cured him. I mean, part of it, as you can see, the structure is partly in ruins. There's water right down the bottom there. It's difficult to envisage what it would actually have looked like in Jesus' time. But again, I found this moving, that this was the actual place where that happened. And also nearby is a church called St. Anne's Church, dedicated to the Mother of Mary. And tradition has it that Mary's parents lived near this spot. This was a lovely church, and people were queuing in here in order to be able to take up a position at the front and to sing. So while we were waiting, we heard people singing different things, and when it was our turn, we sang How Great Thou Art.
Yeah. One reason they liked it is because the acoustics was amazing.
Yes, that's why people sing, is because of the acoustics. Yeah. Just wanted to show you this photo. Our group's on the left, sitting at a cafe, but these Ethiopian Christians came along singing and clapping, and it's just a snapshot really of the number of different groups and nationalities of people that were there that we keep on about. But it made a real impression on us. Yeah. And here they are a bit closer up. I wasn't that close to them when I took the photo. I think I must have cropped it. So we're coming up to the events of the last week of Jesus' life now, as represented by the buildings. And this is the Via Dolorosa, the road along which Jesus was taken carrying his cross. And there are various stations on the way, and we stopped at various points. The man in the middle holding the red book was at the time the minister of Trinity Church in Bury St Edmunds, and he helped lead it, and his reading there. We went into one of the chapels, or one place, didn't we? But I haven't put that photo here. I'm there on the left with a lady who's on the far left. We can't remember her name, but she was quite, no, I better be careful what I say. She wasn't young. And she kept up, didn't she? But it was hard going for her.
Well, Jacqui befriended her really, so that she looked after her.
Yes, I was always giving her my arm, so I came quite fond of her, but I can't remember her name. That's a bit annoying. So the Via Dolorosa ends up at the Holy Sepulchre Church. Again, this is a big church that's been built on reputed sites. And in this case, it's reputedly over the site of the actual crucifixion and also the tomb, because they weren't that far away. Now, there are competing sites for both those things. But this is where the big church is. And here is inside the church. It's not a very good photo, but it's just to show you again about the different traditions, because on the left is an Orthodox chapel and there's things going on there. And on the right is a Roman Catholic chapel, all within the same building. And the Catholics are getting ready to have a service. Now, in the Orthodox part, there's an altar there, and that's me in the skirt bending down, because there was a hole in the stonework there. And this was supposedly the site of, and it may well be, this is reputed to be the site of the crucifixion, and you could put your hand down the hole and feel the stone on which it said the cross was, and people were queuing for this in a very, very prayerful and devotional manner. Now, and I did it along with everybody else. It didn't actually do a lot for me, but Jen, it made a big impact on you, didn't it?
Well, the significance of it, of that particular site, is, if you can imagine, this is like on the first floor of the building. It was on a slope, so you went in, but it was as though this was the first floor, and you could go down the next level on the building, and directly underneath where that is, directly underneath, was the stone where Adam is supposed to have been, his skull was buried. And for me, as you put your hand on down the hole, it was like, it wasn't just that you were linking up with 2000 years ago, you were linking up almost for eternity, because forever really, and for centuries and centuries and centuries and centuries, there's this continual link. And I just found that, yeah, amazing, really.
It's a powerful effect on you,
Yes,
doesn't it?
indeed.
Well, there's that part where you can experience the place of the crucifixion, and then there's also the part where the tomb of Jesus is supposed to have been, and it's in that structure in the middle of the picture here. But when we were there, there was a huge queue. I mean, there were just so many people. We chose not to queue and to wait, so we never went inside. But I like this picture because of the light coming in at the top there, and somehow that speaks to me of resurrection without having gone inside. But there's another site which purports to be the tomb, and this one looks like a tomb and is in fact a first century tomb. And the stone is there, if you can make it out, stuck over the side of the tomb itself. And this is all set in a lovely garden. And that's the inside of the tomb. As I say, it's a genuine first century tomb, whether or not it's that of Christ. And there's the area, I think, on the left where the body would have been laid. And I'm not sure what the Christian symbol means, but maybe somebody else will know. But on the door, it proclaims that he is not here, for he is risen. And whether or not this tomb is the real tomb of Jesus, whether or not, it was a lovely, powerful place. And you could really feel as though he is risen from the dead in that place. That was in the garden. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. And as we come to the end of my slides, we also visited all these places, which we haven't shown you. Jericho, Masada, where Herod had his fort, the Dead Sea, a place called the Mount of Beatitudes, one called the Mount of Temptation. We went to Cana. We visited a Palestinian school for blind pupils. And on the way back to the airport, we visited Caesarea Philippi, where Herod, no, I better be careful not say inaccurate information. It had connections with Herod, and it has connections with St. Paul as well as with Jesus. And I thought I'd just end with showing you the Dead Sea. It was quite amazing to go there. We were told to take our swimming stuff, but also told how to behave in the salted water so that we would float and not turn upside down or have anything unfortunate happen. So here's people from our party floating away. And I think the next slide has got us. Oh, yes, but we're going to move on from that fairly quickly and finish with a view from the Sea of Galilee. So let me return to everybody. Right, I can see everybody on my screen again now. And you're all still there, which is a relief. Okay, there's I've got something I wrote to finish with. I wrote it as a hymn, but I'll read it as a poem, but I'll do that right at the very end. Now, would anybody like to offer a comment if you're one of the people that have been to the Holy Land, or anybody ask a question? Right, got Heather and Doreen again. We thank the Lord for Heather and Doreen. Oops, there you are. but you're muted, Doreen.
Can't hear you.
Right. Did you imagine that it was going to be so built up? I suppose that's rather naive of me to think that, but it sort of puts you off because you have this wonderful image of all open space, don't you? And now it's all built on. Did that put you off at all?
Jen.
No, as I say, it was surprising, particularly for Nazareth. But I think, okay, we have images in our head, but what you forget is that you all, but it's how it feels as well. And I know this seems obvious, but the sheer heat of the place and the fact there's very little grass and there's a lot of sand, and I mean, all of that would have been the same. So although it might not look the same as it did, you have a real sense of it feeling like it did.
Yeah.
Yes, it was very moving in places and at times, regardless of all the people and all the built upness. But at other times, it felt like this was a modern city in Jerusalem's case. And of course, we haven't mentioned at all the difficulties between Israelis and Palestinians. I mean, we heard and saw also difficult things and horrible things. And one of the times we were in Jerusalem, we heard gunfire, and we learnt the next day that somebody had been shot, but it had actually been an Israeli that had been shot by Israelis. He'd gone on a bit of a rampage with mental problems, and they thought he was a Palestinian and they shot him. So there's all that side of it. But nonetheless, it's an experience that I wouldn't have wanted to miss.
And we did say that we wouldn't mind going again, really, didn't we?
Well, now that I've been thinking about it all again, I want to go again. But
and we'd know more about it.
And we'd know what we were doing. Yes.
Yeah.
Take the right photographs.
Yeah.
Right, let's see if anybody else wants. Thanks for asking again, because everybody else looked very quiet. Anyone else?
Is Anne going to say something?
Let's see. Anne Thorpe.
And then Cliff.
And then Cliff.
I haven't actually got a question, but just to say thank you to both of you for sharing those lovely photographs, because I've never been to been there. So, you know, for me, it's a complete, it's like looking at the Bible, isn't it? You can see if you look at the photographs, you've got the Bible in mind at the same time.
It brings it to life.
Yeah, that's right. It was lovely. So thank you.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you. Now, I think Cliff was going to speak. I just need to find him.
Okay, I'm here.
Yeah, so you are. Let me. Oh, wait a minute. There you are.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to say, you have sort of reminded me of all the places that I also visited. Yes, everything became fresh.
When did you go, Cliff?
I went 2017 when I was here in my first. 2018.
Oh,
yes.
not long ago.
Not long ago.
Not long ago, exactly. Yes, when I was in my second year here in Norfolk, yes. That's when we went. I went with Cliff College.
Right.
Yes, it was a study, sort of a study with Cliff College, and then he graduated after that.
And what was most memorable for you?
I can say everything really, because to me everything became real in that sense, you know, visiting, because my theology, you know, back like from Zimbabwe, it was like more of book theology. Yes, I never thought that those places really existed. Yes. Exactly, to be honest with you, it's like when we were doing our theology and things like that, we were thinking of even places like Jerusalem. We never thought it's a place that is here on earth. We would imagine it, somewhere.
Right.
Exactly. So visiting there, it was really helpful. Yes.
Yes, I
So,
know, that's great. Thanks for saying
yes.
so. That's just made me think of something and I've lost it again. What did I want to say? Yes, I know what I wanted to say. That if anybody listening to this does go in the future, either with McCabe pilgrimages, who are very good, or with anybody else, and you don't need a party to go with, by the way, because on our group were individuals who had booked as individuals and they've just been put in with our group. But if you ever do go, get some sort of guide before you go and some sort of sense of the different places, because as I say, we just went in a daze from one thing to another to start with until we got hold of a guidebook and started reading up about them. And before we realized that we had to put on hold whether things really were genuine places or not, although, as I've said, some of them really were, and they were the most moving places. Okay, it's time we came to an end. I'm going to read you my hymn. You may or may not know that I've written quite a few hymns to the tune Bunesson, which is Morning Has Broken. And this hymn about the Holy Land is to that tune, but I'm not going to sing it because that wouldn't be pleasant. So I'm going to read it. Holy Land journey, traveling with Jesus. Bethlehem calls us to Manger Square. Is this the true site of Jesus' birthplace? Or does it matter if here or there? Holy Land journey, traveling with Jesus. Nazareth asks us, what can I bring? Mary and Joseph must have drawn water from the one ancient life-giving spring. Holy Land journey, traveling with Jesus. Galilee draws us down to the lake. Can we imagine those first disciples leaving their fishing just for his sake? Holy Land journey, traveling with Jesus. Capernaum ruins speak to us much. Here we envisage ordinary people talking to Jesus, wanting his touch. Holy Land journey, traveling with Jesus. Capital city, Jerusalem. Places and churches, gardens and ruins, history of many women and men. Holy Land journey, traveling is over. People are waiting. Home is not far. Have you left Jesus in that far country? Or is he with you wherever you are? Thanks for being with us. We've recorded it, so it'll be on the website in the next couple of days if you want to look at anything again or get anyone else to look at it. Next Tuesday, everybody, we are going to have a break from Tuesdays at 7. So there isn't going to be one next week, the week after Easter. But we will resume after that for the rest of April and for May.
No, we're away 1 week.
I know we're away 1 week, but we're going to get someone to do it.
Do they know?
No. So not next week, but the week after. So shall we just say goodbye to each other?
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay,
Thank you.
bye.
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 Thank you very much.
Jacqui and Jen. Thank you.